Around the 1000 block of Albert Road, we attended Grace Baptist Church. The congregation there, under Reverend Piro and then under Reverend Glajch, were a Slavic congregation. I remember we had wonderful music at the church. There was also always a soloist or a quartet or duet, and we had choirs, and especially one special quartet made up of Mr. Schrammel, Mr. Gazo, Mrs. Glajch, and I can't remember the fourth person, and accompanied by Ann Vinter at the time, Obachensky, and they sang out of these lovely black books that were long. They opened these books like this, they were narrow and long, and they would sing these beautiful Czech songs, and I remember the famous one was Slish, Slish, and they sang it here in this church as well. I still remember that.
John Jerrison was the superintendent of the Sunday school, and he also ran a boys club on Saturdays, and we did some woodworking.
Archie was also baptized on Albert Road.
Oh yes, and I used to call him my cousin, John Osden, Emily Goot, and Marilyn Meredith. I remember that baptism, back in 1956. And
there was also a very thriving young people we had that was in English. They had their service in English, and made up of the Glosses, the Gazos, the Glajch, Lubelan, the Goots, Osgens, and Glajchs that we can remember, and probably many others. We came to, my mother, father, brother, and I came to Canada in 1949, and about 1950, 51 maybe it was, they let us live at Grace Baptist Church on Albert Road, and my father was the caretaker in lieu of paying rent. Our living quarters were behind the sanctuary. It was just one big room, and there were some beds. I remember curtains on these wires. And on Sunday mornings, Sunday school was held in that room, so my mother closed off the beds, and she had to keep the room clean. And also, our kitchen was in the basement, and so on Sunday mornings, she had to clean up the kitchen because a Sunday school was also held in the kitchen. I remember fondly the Christmas Eve services we had. I was just a little girl, and the services always included very long poems that were recited, memorized by the children. We call them bosnichki. We did all these lovely poems, and there were plays. There was also musical instruments, a variety of levels. I remember Archie, I think he was maybe 9 or 10, played an accordion. Probably the last time he ever played it. We also had choirs and quartets and soloists. And Christmas Eve, there was a Sunday school program, probably held the Saturday before Christmas. And John Jerrison was the superintendent of the Sunday school. And during the service, he would always say he could hear some bells. And we would all listen for these bells. And then the service would go on, and John would say, I think I can hear some bells. And then we started hearing bells. I'm sure he had somebody ringing bells somewhere. And the service would go on, and we would all be listening, children, and he'd say, oh, I'm sure I can hear the bells. I can hear something on the roof. Well, by then we'd all run outside, and we'd be looking up at the sky, looking at the roof, and then John would call us back in, and there was Santa, and we were always surprised, and it was always so much fun.
This small group had the foresight, way back in the 50s, to buy some property on Tecumseh Road, the place where the church is now standing. I believe this was Sandwich East at the time. And matter of fact, this was all empty field. And before the church was built, a circus came to town. And the members of the church set up a parking lot on the grass. And they charged 25 cents per car to park. And so they raised some of the money for the building fund at that time. Now first the basement was completed. And it was literally built by the people of this church. I remember Reverend Glajch, Irena's grandfather, downstairs when the cement came. They were wearing boots, and the cement was coming in, and they were raking the cement to smooth it out. And of course, we had many tradespeople in this church. Mr. Zaranichek was a cabinet maker and a carpenter. We had, my father was a carpenter as well. The Shramos, the Gazos and the Goots, all were proficient in bricklaying, so the bricks were built by those people. And later on, well, first of all, they built the basement, and then they started holding services downstairs. And the main floor of the church was the roof, and that stayed that way for several years before they were able to continue building the church.
The very first wedding that happened in the church was that of Anne and Fred Opachensky. But the ceremony took place at Temple Baptist Church, because we just had the basement. And the reception, though, was held in the church. And I remember it was such an exciting time having this first wedding, and Anne and Fred sitting on the, what's it called, the stage at the time. And the ladies would be my mother and his mother, and many of the ladies would always do the cooking. And all the young ladies available were the servers. And of course, I was one of the servers at their wedding.
Then the work on the upstairs started working. People started working to build this, and again, our own people built most of the church. There was fundraising for the beams, and I remember my sister coming up with enough money to put up one of these, and then, so different families started doing that. We built the church, and once we started up here, we started English services. We had several lay pastors come in, and I remember a name of Mr. Boyer, and then a Jim Thompson came, and then after the lay folks, the missionary was Ethel Alban, and I think she was subsidized by the Baptist Convention, and she assisted the church while we were transitioning into a Czech church and an English church. And the next phase was when Bethany joined our church.
I remember them marching down the road coming to join our church. Say the very last thing.
Oh yeah, now, and that brings us to the present day, and Irena and I, this is the only church family that we have formally been involved in all our life. So we appreciate Grace very much.